Election experts will say that an election is a process, and this goes beyond the event of voting. This is the case with the Electoral Commission of Zambia. After the 2021 general election, the Commission has continued with voter registration. But in the midst of all of this, there have been by-elections, and stakeholders have had concerns with some of these by-elections. We ask why the Electoral Commission of Zambia is allowing this to happen, and some of the best solutions that can be provided to appease all involved. I sat down with the Chief Electoral Officer at the Electoral Commission of Zambia, Kasaro, and I asked him how they will stay impartial, but also, time immemorial, the question on the credibility and independence of the ECZ. Welcome to the stage. My name is Dingindaba Jonah Bioya. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of This Day. CEO would like to thank you so much for creating time. And I'd like for us to start off by talking about, I believe, something that a lot of people would like us to get out of the way. And this is with regards to the independence of the Electoral Commission of Zambia, because for a very long time, we've had some stakeholders concerned that the ECZ may not be independent, and would like to find out how you're working to ensure that you are free from political influence, and help us understand how independent you are.
Thank you, Jonah, and thanks to Diamond TV for the opportunity to be able to speak to the Diamond TV viewership, who are also part of our stakeholders in the electoral process. Yeah, so I think that the Electoral Commission, since its establishment, has demonstrated its independence, and this independence is drawn from the legal framework. So the electoral laws, right up to the apex, which is the Constitution, enshrine the independence of the institution. Now, this also, if you look historically at the performance of the institution, has been demonstrated in the conduct of the various elections thus far in the history of the country. I think viewers out there will note that the Electoral Commission has overseen transitions of power from one political party to another through the management of elections in Zambia. Now, that being the case, we do understand as an institution that our mandate is a very contentious one, because at stake is political power. So we are, maybe to use that phrase, the gatekeepers to the seats of power in them. Therefore, those contesting will always have comments to say about how we conduct the process. I think one would draw from, much as it's not at the same level, one would draw from soccer or football, as it were. You realize that when the higher the stakes of a game, the more the spotlight is on the referee. Yeah, so picking up on that, we continue to reflect as an institution in terms of how we're conducting the process and how we're managing elections to ensure that we continue to be as independent as provided for by the law. You will you will note that elections and the electoral environment continue to evolve, and that compels us to continue to reflect and look at the electoral environment, and see, given the context we're in now, how best can we continue to demonstrate that independence. Let me also just indicate here that in a number of cases, we do have noticed that stakeholders would question the independence of the Electoral Commission without necessarily pointing to a specific action or indeed decision of the Commission. So that sometimes does not help us to look at, okay, in terms of how best can we improve so that going forward, the electoral process continues to meet the expectations of the people of Zambia.
That's true, and I agree with you to an extent that elections are very charged periods, and sometimes the charge is also emotionally charged. So how then do you strike a balance as the Electoral Commission of Zambia to ensure that you also uphold another end of this argument? Because it's also true that it is your responsibility to manage such situations. So how do you then strike a balance between the emotions which may arise and result in sometimes non-issues, but also fulfilling your mandate, which is to handle these situations professionally?
Yes, so in that case, then I think we look at case by case. So I think that the media in this case does help to facilitate this process. So I think whenever a comment is or indeed an allegation is leveled against the Commission, the media has done its best to get the Commission's perspective and view on such issues. So I think that then that provides us an opportunity to address specific items as they come up. And our focus, as I've earlier indicated, is always to say, look, the electoral process is a process that is conducted or played out in public view. So at what particular stage then is this concern so that then as an institution we can continue to address that. So we do recognize it's a continuous process of continuing to educate, continuing to inform, so that then the fears, as it were, may be allayed. Yeah.
It is true, and I find it interesting that you highlight elections as, a process, which is very true. And you're working towards ensuring that these elections are transparent. You've said that you have this entire exercise in the public and in front of people to strengthen the process. But there's a lot of people that feel that while all of this happens, there is some mystery that is attached to elections and taking away from the very essence of this transparency. That's why I'd like to find out some of the measures that you're putting in place as the Electoral Commission of Zambia to ensure that elections in Zambia are much more transparent and build up to the ultimate goal of having free and fair elections.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will tackle the question from a process point of view, but and specifically focusing on the period leading up to voting day and immediately after. So in terms of making sure that the process is fair, you will note that immediately an election is called, the Commission does establish what is known as a campaign period. So once an election day is set, a campaign period is established, and the Commission has since put in place a mechanism where participating candidates are called up to develop a campaign timetable, so that then there is agreement right from the beginning of the campaign to say which area of the contest where an election is being held will each candidate be at a particular time. So that does provide for an environment where each of the candidates can campaign freely. And of course, relying on the code of conduct as an aspect of access to media and so forth. Now, when it comes to voting day itself, I think that the operations at the voting center themselves, again, based on the legal framework and on the laws, are designed to provide for transparency of the process. So, for example, here I would want to mention the opening of a polling station. that is open. So before voting starts in the polling station, the process is open to observation by observers, monitors, but most importantly, agents representing each of the candidates. So our presiding officers who are responsible for the operations of the polling station are required to ensure that the agents can see that the ballot boxes, or if it's one election, a ballot box is empty, and then it's sealed in their presence, and then so that the only open place is the aperture where the voters will actually be casting their votes. And the layout of the polling station itself provides for maximum visibility while in providing for the secrecy of the ballot, like you mentioned, in terms of the positioning of the voting booth, provides that a voter, once they have been given the ballot paper, they can mark it in privacy, but while at the same time, the people, the agents and the election officials in the polling station are able to see that this process is being done as required by the law. Then at the end of the voting process also, and maybe also let me touch on the aspect of identification of the voters. As the voters are coming into the polling station, their names are read out, and the commission does provide for the contesting parties to get access to the register of voters so that they can also cross-check that whoever indeed walks into the polling station is registered at that particular center. Yeah, so then coming to the end of the close of the poll, again, the presiding officers are required and do announce the close of the poll, the sealing up of the aperture, and then do the paperwork, and even now beginning to proceed into the counting process. The counting process itself is so deliberate and meticulous to the extent that then each person in the room is able to see, first of all, the allocation of the ballots as they have been marked to particular trays belonging to the candidates before finally being counted to see what votes each candidate has garnered in that particular polling station. So all these mechanisms are really building toward the transparency of the process. Then at the conclusion of the count, the results are pasted at the polling station, and indeed, rather even before that, the agents have the opportunity to sign off the results announcement forms at the polling station, and these are also pasted, and they have also access to those, so they get copies that they can then transmit to their respective structures. Now, after that, then the process does shift to the totaling center, which is also open to observation, and then the totaling happens, and then an announcement or indeed a declaration is made by the returning officer. And if it is for the presidential election, the process is repeated at the national center. So you will note that in this whole process, the center really is the polling station. So once people, given the openness of that process, then we shouldn't see that there is any concerns around the fact that the process is not transparent. Yeah, added to these mechanisms really is that the commission does undertake voter education to sensitize as many people as possible in terms of the operations themselves to guarantee the secrecy of their vote, but also the openness of the process, that then they can rest assured that the process is being conducted in their interest. We do engage stakeholders throughout the process so that then if there are any adjustments in the processes and any introduction of new ways, these are well discussed well in advance, so that then come voting day, these are not considered to be last-minute additions. We also have, conflict resolution management mechanisms that have been put in place. Again, speaking to the open door policy towards the process. So yes, the process itself is open to the public, but also the institution itself has taken the posture of an open door. Any stakeholder can come in to seek audience and see how best their concern can be addressed. Yeah.
Well, then let me draw you back to some of the things that you've talked about. And I'll start by highlighting the campaign schedules that you have talked about. They're very critical in an election, but it's also true that we've had complaints from some stakeholders, even in recent by-elections, where you will say that a campaign schedule has been shared, but there are some political parties that will not adhere to these campaign schedules, and we will see political parties clashing in the build-up to the election through these campaigns. Why does this happen on your watch as the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and how can we stop this?
Yeah, I wish to confirm that the Commission, through its structures, has received complaints to that effect. And most of these complaints have related to by-elections and particularly cabinet ministers going to campaign. I also wish to confirm that at each and every time that report has been received, the Commission has been able to ably deal with it. Yeah, recognizing that as the law sits, serving cabinet ministers proceed to these by-elections not as substantive office holders per se, but as members of political parties campaigning for their respective candidates. So I think that we're seeing adherence to these campaign timetables taking root in the electoral process. I think from the by-elections that we have been conducting in the recent past. And the conflict resolution structures at the lower level have provided an effective mechanism to be able to quickly resolve these issues so that they do not escalate beyond control. So at that local level, you find stakeholders would have probably engaged, and in some instances, even before the Commission intervenes, resolutions are arrived at, and the campaigns proceed as earlier planned.
I'll still draw you back to this because some of these stakeholders that you talk about also continue to complain with how the issues are handled. They don't feel that they are protected by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, that they are going to advance some of these complaints to you as a commission, but they don't reach a logical conclusion, at least on their end. And so, especially the opposition, I believe that you've come across some of the complaints that the opposition have raised. And the question is, what do you do as the Electoral Commission of Zambia when such complaints come in, especially when it comes to punitive measures that are put in place to safeguard those that are innocent in such cases?
Yeah, so I'll speak, I think, specifically to the campaign timetables. So in terms of the structures at play, we are talking about conflict management committees in these respective jurisdictions that are set up every time we have a by-election. And prior to the nominations, we do get to have stakeholder engagements where these structures are introduced to, if it's before nominations, aspiring candidates. And in addition to the conflict resolution, conflict management committees, we do establish political party liaison committees in those areas, so that then we have these forums where issues can be discussed. So when it comes to a campaign timetable, the nature of campaigns, I think, renders itself to for any party to be able to know in advance if an encroachment into their campaign area is about to take place. So at that point, the issue is brought before the committee, And I think in our political party liaison, we do encourage that there is dialogue amongst themselves, amongst the political parties themselves, to discuss these issues. So look, you are planning to hold a meeting, but as we discussed in that during the drawing up the campaign period, this is our area this week. And we wish to report that in a good number of instances, even at that level, issues have been resolved. Now, if at the bilateral level, the discussions do not yield, then the aggrieved party can escalate that to the conflict management committee, which quickly convenes a meeting. And the approach of these committees is mediation. Remember, the commission, and even through this mechanism, the commission is focus is on prevention of these conflicts. So the approach taken is mediation to come up with a solution that one might call win-win. In the unlikely event that probably by the time the committee has met, the event has gone ahead, rather the campaign, though the encroachment into another person's campaign area, another candidate's area has taken place. One of the strategies that these committees would use is then to compensate for that. So, okay, in this respect, then this is how we'll restructure the timetable so that then the lost time or indeed opportunity for that political party can be regained, so that then there's fairness or indeed equity in the process. So this is the approach that we've taken. Granted that you will note that when such events occur, with access to media, the aggrieved party would make a statement. And after we have proceeded to agree, there's no follow-up statement. So, oh, look, we agreed. Yes, we did air this complaint. We agreed, and so forth. And so then, in the eyes of the public, or in the ears of the public, that issue remained unresolved. But we wish to report that yes, these issues are being handled at that level. Yeah.
While we're still on this, I'd like to drive you to the issue of political violence. It has been present in several of the elections that we have in the country. But let's look at the side that you play as the ECZ, and this is in the form of punishment. How do you met out punishment for political parties that are erring, that are found in political violence, especially in the process that is related to an election?
Yeah, I think that stakeholders do agree across the board that violence is something that we should, we're all looking forward to see a day when it's completely eradicated from our electoral process. Yeah, now the Commission does rely on the provisions of the Electoral Code of Conduct to manage the campaign periods and the electoral process in this respect. Now, like I indicated earlier, the Commission's approach to this is more preventive. So the approach is to do our best in the facilitation of the electoral process to ensure that violence is prevented. Now, in this respect, then, this is where what I indicated earlier, the processes and mechanisms that I pointed out do come in. So the development of campaign timetables, the establishment of the political party liaison committees, the conflict management committees, so that then at that level, there is a lot of interaction amongst the stakeholders, so that if there are any issues, given the contentious nature of elections, are resolved as early as possible in the process. Yes. Now, where in the instances where violence has indeed occurred, is that the Commission does, you will note that violence itself is a criminal offense. So the Commission does rely on the police service around investigations of these issues to see then where the issues around these particular incidences were coming from, and so on and so forth. So now it is because of those mechanisms, investigative mechanisms, that sometimes members of the public would think, well, the commission is not doing anything, because sometimes probably the investigations may take longer than an actual electoral process, in this case, probably by-election. Yeah, because granted, you realize that whenever punishment, as it were, as you alluded to, ought to be meted out, the commission has to sit on solid ground. So those are some of the mechanisms put in place, hence the focus of the commission towards prevention of these occurrences.
Let me draw you back to some of the responses that you gave me earlier on with regards to transparency of elections, that while the Electoral Commission of Zambia has made progress with regards making the elections much more digital than they previously were, one of the concerns is that the transparency of these elections is threatened by speed, that there isn't much or maximization of digital platforms to make elections speedy in terms of results, and hence safeguarding the vote of the people. And so I'd like to find out what you, as the Electoral Commission of Zambia, are putting in place, security measures and integrity of a vote to ensure that the vote counting has the highest levels of integrity and results transmission is speedy.
I think when it comes to speed, I think that whenever a stakeholder has expressed concern around speed and urging the commission to leverage technology, I think it centers around the whole issue of results. Yeah. Now, what stakeholders need to appreciate is that the result, the election result itself, is a culmination of a lot of steps that take place after the close of the poll, and the process that probably takes the longest is the counting process, because this process has to be deliberate and transparent, so that then every participating candidate, through their agents in the polling station, are assured that the votes that were cast, the ballots that were cast, are appropriately and correctly allocated. Now, in this respect, then, the commission has to always have strike that delicate balance between accuracy, speed, and transparency of the process. So we're still looking at that process of the counting. When it comes to results transmission, the commission, so really after the counting of the votes at the polling station and so forth, the results form completed, then these are delivered to the totaling center. So it is at this stage then that the commission has introduce technology to facilitate the transmission of the same. For example, if we're speaking about the general election to head office, so that then the nation is informed as quickly as possible. Going forward, the commission is looking at enhancing this further, so that as results are received at the national result center or election centers, it were, besides the totals, members of the public are able to have access to the actual input documents, drilling down into the polling station. So that's with respect to results. Then you will note that the commission has for some time now been utilizing biometrics technology in its voter registration processes. Chief reason among this, again, is to ensure the accuracy of the register, so that then a person appears only in one voting station only. Now, the commission is leveraging that also to see how it can introduce, and this is happening during the by-elections, introducing voter verification mechanisms, so biometric or electronic voter verification devices at each of the centers, so that then voters, not only are they positively and quickly identified and thereby quickening the voting process, but where they inadvertently show up at the wrong polling station, they can be redirected to where they were correctly registered and therefore expected to vote from. Yeah, another area of technology that we are seeing, we've seen it being introduced in the process, is pre-online registration. And again, this is, I think, to address the concerns around spending a lot of time on the queue to register as a voter. So when then those voters, eligible citizens that have access to the internet can capture their details on their own, and then when they get to the center, just do the verification and get the voter's card printed out. So the commission continues to interrogate and exercise its mind toward introductions of technology, and in each of the stages of the electoral process to increase that speed. Yeah. And probably maybe just to repeat myself is that, again, we're cognizant that at some point, the introduction of technology sort of like, again, reinforces this myth view about elections, because the nature of technology is that things are in electronic, therefore not very visible, as it were. So then it adds, so we really making sure that the technology is introduced, but and does not negatively impact the transparency of the process, as it were. So really, these are some of the mechanisms. Yeah.
So I'm right to also conclude that part of the reason why the Electoral Commission of Zambia is not implementing some of these technologies is because it may pose as a threat to the integrity of the process, because people may not exactly trust some of the technologies that are put in place. Is that right for me to conclude?
To a certain extent, yes. So I think that where the technology is beneficial to the process, the Commission does, through engagements, through education, do its best to ensure that the stakeholders are as comfortable as possible, so that then the technology is introduced, not unilaterally, as it were. So probably the right way to, yeah, like you've rightly said, I think cautious, so that when technology is introduced, does not take away the confidence or indeed the transparency in the process. Yeah.
Now let's talk about something that you've probably come across as a talking point from some of the stakeholders, and this has got to do with the rationale by you, the Electoral Commission of Zambia, behind the requirement by participating parties in by-elections to have their adoption certificate signed by both the party president and the secretary general of these political parties. Some of these stakeholders are concerned with this, and they would like to understand why the ECZ is doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, indeed, we have observed that this particular item has engendered a lot of comments. But stakeholders may wish to note that the nomination process is facilitated via what we call a nomination form. So the candidates, the aspiring candidates, are required to complete a form to indicate the intention to contest an election and the required supporters. Now, part of that document requires them to indicate if they are sponsored by a political party. And then they would indicate the political party that is sponsoring their candidature for that particular election. Now, it is that sponsorship of the political party that political party sponsorship of an aspiring candidate that is demonstrated through an adoption certificate from that political party. Now, the clarity that the Commission has provided in this process is to say, look, for the Commission to rest assured of the authenticity of the document, let it be signed. It must be signed by the office holders that are legally recognized. I think you will note that any institution, and when it comes to specifically the political parties, the Secretary General is the key office holder in that particular institution when it comes to its legal status. So then, with that clarification and requirement, it places the Commission in a place where once this certificate, adoption certificate, is presented, the Commission can rest assured that yes, this particular aspiring candidate is sponsored by this political party, so that then the rest of the process is not put at risk. I think that there are examples in the past where the Commission has received more than one adoption certificates, and you know, even as you know, as late as the 2022, rather 2021 general election, and the Commission then gets to be placed on the spot, as it were. So really, it's more a clarification of the process. And wish to note that this is across the board. It's not targeted at any, it's again, of course, except for independent candidates who contest in their own right.
Let's talk about the voter register. You have committed to keeping this voter register updated as the Electoral Commission of Zambia. You've had a continuous voter registration exercise. And I'm curious to know how this process is going and what response you are getting from the public with the continuous voter registration.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah, for that. And you've rightly pointed out that the Commission commenced continuous registration of voters. So this started in 2022 with 10 districts across the country. So in 2022, it was the provincial centers that were opened. So this in 2023, an additional 10 districts were added. So that's one per, another additional one district per province. And I wish to report that early this month, the Commission did add another 10 districts. So this makes 3 in each province. Yeah, I think that the Commission is observing a growth in access to these services. You may wish to note that these voter registration and the point of call, perhaps just for the information of the viewers out there, is that in the civic center, so the respective civic centers of these districts is the point of call. So we have an office there that eligible citizens can get to, and the services we do provide in there is registration of new registrations. So anyone that has turned 18 or is 18 and above can, if they're not yet on the register of voters, can apply to register. And then those that have lost or the cards have damaged can get them replaced. Indeed, those that would like to transfer, they have moved and would like to participate in elections in the districts where they've moved to, they can apply to do transfers. We're also encouraging citizens to report relations that have since died so that they can be removed from the register of voters. So these are the services that have been provided. And parallel to that, the Commission is also conducting voter education in these districts to encourage the citizens to take advantage of these services being offered. And as such, from time to time, we do conduct what we would call mobile exercises within the respective districts. So, for example, a voter registration office, saying one in Lopula province, for example, we have one in Mansa, which is the central Samfia, and in Chelenge. So, for example, a voter registration office in Chelenge would decide to go to a community center in a particular and sensitize voters and conduct voter registration at that particular center, and then get back to the office for the usual operations. So these centers are open every working day, 8 to 17, and where they're doing a mobile exercise, the stakeholders are duly informed. Yeah, so we have seen a growth in the numbers. I think as of 31st May, over 60,000 in terms of new registrations have been recorded. Yeah, so we're seeing these numbers grow, and I think resources allowing the Commission to expand to other districts, and of course, before the 2026 general election, undertake a mass registration. Now, while this is going on, let me also mention that the law does provide for the Commission to certify the register to ensure that those that have registered are able to participate. So it's not just for information that if I register today, then if there's a by-election happens the next day, then I'll be able to participate in that election. I think there are processes provided for where we have to publish the provisional register. And as we speak now, there's a 90-day period that we did open that closes this June 30th, where we have been displaying the provisional register of voters to ensure that those that were captured before 31st December 2023 are put on the roll, and therefore be able to participate in any upcoming elections as we go forward. Yeah, thank you.
Finally, CEO, let's talk about your vision over the next period that you are overseeing this electoral body. What does your vision look like, and what are some of the key strategic objectives that you have in transforming the Electoral Commission of Zambia to serve the electorate better?
Yeah, thank you, Jonah, for that. I think what I'm setting myself to do is really drive the successful implementation of the strategic plan of the Electoral Commission. And once this is done, and you may wish to note that the Commission has a strategic plan that spans 2023 to 2027. So a successful implementation of this, the strategies therein, we'll see really a commission that really delivers to the expectations and indeed democratic aspirations of the people of Zambia. So what are some of the key issues in that strategy is really, stakeholder engagement and communication. And thank you once again for this platform. So these are some of the strategies to continue to engage with people out there and communicate so that there's really an understanding of the mandate and how the process is done. We're also looking at building the capacity of the institution so that then there is efficiencies in the delivery of the services around the electoral process. And really, then the third pillar really looks at the elections management itself to make sure that the process is as accessible as possible to every eligible citizen. And here we could also speak about persons with disabilities. We're also looking at the aspects that we were talking about, the aspect of speed around results announcement, to make sure that not only that process is as quick as possible, but as informative as possible, so that throughout the process, the people are able to follow and see where the process is at. So really, in a nutshell, that's what is at the center of my mind, and that is what is taking all the energies and working with the team here to see how we can pursue that and achieve as we have set ourselves the targets. Yeah.
Thanks for talking to us on this edition of This Day.
Thank you once again for the opportunity, and continue to encourage citizens, your viewers out there, to take in interest in the electoral process and see what the Commission is delivering on their behalf. Thank you.